So thank you all for coming, and welcome to the Seattle Atheist Church. My talk is the morality of atheism. And so, first, let me just talk about what is morality. So, morality is a term given to our personal and our cultural values, our codes of conduct, what we call our societal norms. And it's our way of distinguishing right from wrong, good from bad. But it's behavioral. It's not objective. And atheists, we often get accused of not having morals by our peers in the religious communities and even the spiritual communities, or being less inclined to do good deeds. So my talk today, I'd like to make the case that one of our most successful evolutionary adaptations as a species, as a human species, is to be selfless and to do good for others. Biological altruism is what I'm talking about. So if you think about it just for a moment, as human beings, we're the only animals on planet Earth that consciously use altruism to advocate the right to life, liberty, and personal happiness for not only each other and other people, but even other animals. So altruism is central to our evolutionary success. And it's one of the key reasons our human species has been so prolific. It sets us apart from other animals here on Earth, and it's physiologically and biologically hardwired. It directly shapes adaptability, health, and our own longevity. But there's another important aspect of altruism, and that's that we're all social animals. And there's a lot of evidence on this, that when we do good for others, the healthier we become ourselves. So, there's a lot of different moralities out there, there's a lot of different cultures out there. Is there some major ingredient or practice globally that connects societies that are the healthiest societies worldwide? Well, it turns out that we're more and more going in that direction, and yes, there are some key ingredients to successful societies worldwide. That being an egalitarian social structure, usually a secular democracy or something taken in that context, where we all treat each other equally. That's foundational. And that societal structure is also supportive of a monogamous family unit, believe it or not. That's somewhat controversial, but that is what the evidence is pointing towards. And it also encourages a positive vision for the future. So, before I jump into those three tenets of what make up a healthy society, or how we build our morality from biological means, I want to step back for a moment, because a lot of people say, well, isn't it really just speech and writing and agriculture and tool making? Isn't large-scale cooperation more related to our success here on planet Earth and our differentiation between the other animals than anything else? Well, if you look at it, crows can talk from a certain perspective. Ants will milk aphids. Chimpanzees make and use tools, and many species of fish cooperate on a large scale. So we need to look a little bit deeper to discuss what separates us and other animals, because, again, this relates to how we develop our own culture and our own morality. There's a fellow I'm really fond of. His name is Tom Suddendorf. And much of this talk today builds on some of the ideas that he puts forward in his book. It's called The Gap. I highly recommend it if you're interested. It's about what separates us from other animals and how we develop our culture and all of the things that make us human. So there's two key ingredients. He calls the first nested scenario building, which is just a fancy way of saying that we have the ability to imagine and reflect on different situations throughout our lives. But then the second key to our success and what differentiates us is our deep-seated drive to link our scenario-building minds together to actually do good for others. This seems to be the turning point that took us from animal communication into open-ended human language, memory into mental time travel, social cognition into theory of mind, and problem solving into abstract reasoning. It built on social traditions and created cumulative culture, and it took empathy and created morality. So we all like to tell stories, people. We like to tell stories. We like to picture future situations, and we have that capacity. We can imagine other people's experiences. We hypothesize potential explanations for the things we see in our world around us. And we plan how to teach, and we reflect on our moral dilemmas. All of this makes up nested scenario building. Now, most mammals have a capacity to simulate. Great apes have a basic capacity to imagine alternative mental scenarios. They daydream, in short. Just like you and I. They think about hidden movements. They learn and interpret human symbols. And they solve problems through mental calculation, not just physical computation. They also have complex social structures and some traditions. They're able to console each other. They recognize themselves in mirrors, and they show signs of play acting and fun, and for deceptive purposes. So in a lot of ways, the great apes actually are comparable and have comparable abilities to our children from the ages, believe it or not, of 18 months to about 24 months. So here's where it gets really, really interesting, though. Human development and our ability to build these mental images, these scenarios, explodes after the age of 2. And I don't know if you remember being 2-year-olds, but I sort of do. And actually, it was really pleasant because there was a lot going on up here for me. And there's a lot going on, it turns out, for all of us. A considerable amount of the waking day for any child past the age of 2, they spend in fantasy play. They conjure up and untiringly repeat scenarios with props and dolls and toys, and they conjure up imagery, narratives, and theater to explain things in their own world. So thinking in a fundamental way is imagining actions and perceptions. And it has been argued that children at play are actually natural scientists, for they hypothesize, they consider probabilities, and then they make causal inferences, not entirely unlike scientists that are in the adult world. And so, back to our morality building and back to those 3 things that build on our cultures and moralities, I would make the argument that the scientific method is actually innate in us. It didn't come from some magical source, and it didn't come from a supernatural source, certainly. And actually, the evidence is pointing to science and our ability to reason and think, creating culture, morality, spirituality, and even God, not the other way around. So, in essence, childhood play provides the opportunity to practice, to build up expectations, and to test. And children take on roles. And gradually they learn to deliberately imagine scenarios and consequences of those scenarios without having to actually act them out. So now it's all internal. They learn to simulate things mentally, and they learn to think. And it's no accident that we are the only species on the planet, except maybe for whales, we're not sure about that have an extended and prolonged childhood, where we're allowed to be our most imaginative, our most creative, our most responsible, and even our most destructive selves. practically without consequence. And I would say that we need to embrace that and understand that from a moral perspective. And eventually, children can imagine an almost limitless array of events. They contrast what did happen with what may happen in the future. And there's a key ability to combine and recombine basic elements like people, objects, and different actions into new and novel scenarios. This allows for the nested thinking that Suddendorf says is one of the key elements to our ability to separate from the other animals on planet Earth. Individual simulation is flexible and powerful, but it also can be risky. So while I'm thinking internally, and I know I think I have everything all figured out, in the heat of the day, the ocean may be an inviting location for a swim. And I may not notice that sign about the dangerous current. So individually, we often miscalculate. We harbor false beliefs and we become confused as to what options we should pursue. So for that flexible scenario building as an individual to ultimately lead to survival and greater survival strategies for our species, it required something else. And our ancestors discovered that they could dramatically improve accuracy of their own internal simulations by sharing scenarios with other people and connecting minds. And there's actually a significant drive in our genetic makeup and our physiology to do so. We give each other advice, often, for instance, by posting signs about the possible presence of dangerous currents. We exchange our ideas and give feedback. We ask others and we inform them by recounting what it was like for them in any given situation and sharing what it might be like for someone else. We take an interest even without knowing whether anything's important or useful, and it doesn't really matter. We don't care necessarily that something comes out of it. We're just driven to share in that way. And what we found, and our ancestors found, is that our expectations and plans are subsequently a lot better than they could have been if we hadn't listened to these other people's mental images. It's generally good advice to consider advice, and preferably advice from a great diversity of sources. We benefit from cooperating with other people who are building scenarios of their own. For instance, like today, our audience, we can now recruit each other for common goals. We can hatch complex plans, we can divide labor, we can pledge allegiance to each other and to a higher purpose, a higher societal purpose. We can accumulate achievements and pass them on to the next generation. And to ensure all this happens, we appear to be hardwired with that insatiable urge to connect minds, and connect with one another. We're social creatures, and there's a lot of evidence that primates, which we are the highest order of primates, that social pressure drove primate intelligence, and we took that to the next level. Because unlike other primates, our children sob to attract attention and sympathy, and we react. We ask what's wrong, and we try to make things better. We look each other in the eye, and we share what's on each other's minds. And this urge to connect is crucial to the establishments of signs and words that allow us to read each other's minds and express our own. We pursue shared goals where our closest animal relatives do not. Even 2-year-old children outperform even the great apes on tasks like social learning, communication, and reading intentions, just seeing people's facial expressions. Other animals may give alarm calls and food calls, but they don't show many signs or a drive to share their experience or their knowledge. Language is our primary means by which we exchange our minds, and we talk to each other about the past, and we make plans for future, again, getting back to those key elements to what creates healthy society. We teach and we learn from each other, and we argue about what's right and what's wrong. And all of that serves to remind us of how pervasive the urge to connect with one another and build community is. And those who lack that drive often have severe social difficulties because our urge to connect is essential for creation of culture and to shape our minds and endow us with the awesome powers that we all have. So, you might ask yourself, what would my mother have said about any situation that you find yourself in? Or what would my father have said? And we care about whether our parents, our friends, our heroes, and even our gods would be proud of what we do, even if they don't exist any longer or they never did exist. But we do care, and we think about what others might remember us for. And this is what drives the notion of community and morality and doing good for others in a selfless way. We invest heavily in unselfish actions, such as fighting oppression or pollution or helping any given club, a person, or any animal. When we take on a cause, we become something bigger. We become part of something bigger, and we derive deep feeling and meaning from that. And one of the most remarkable things about humans is that we can strive to make difference in the world. We deliberately practice random acts of kindness. We fight injustice on a daily basis. We teach the next generation. And we even start revolutions. And none of that would happen if we didn't have this urge, this biological necessity to connect our minds. So, the nested scenario building that Sundorf talks about, and building that drive to link our minds, turn the qualities of the great apes into our uniquely human special qualities. They created powerful feedback loops, neurologically, that dynamically changed our condition. And they carried us where no other animals on planet Earth have ever gone, and they carry us still. The nested scenario building and genetic impulse that connect us together and that urge us to connect with other people reminds us that altruism and empathy daily inform our morality. So, in closing, by observing and respecting our primary evolutionary priorities within our culture, we inherently create and strive for egalitarian, inclusive civil society. The priorities for building healthful culture, they're very easy to name, but they're difficult to practice. So, focus on your role as friend to your partner and to your family first. Then focus on your role and what role your family plays in your neighborhood and what role you play as a group in your neighborhood and in community. And then finally, focus on your own personal development. And then practice strategies to build intimacy and to build rapport with one another. Happiness, health, and longevity does always follow from practicing these innately biological, evolutionary, and physiological processes. It's how we're built. So remember, good works in non-mysterious ways. And thank you very much.